If you're concerned about the ongoing rolling crises that we've all been going through in the last months, you might be concerned about access to fresh food and being able to keep your immune system healthy. Now you can get secure access to fresh food no matter what is going on in the world with a food forest. The permaculture food forest offers the most food, water, and shelter of any habitat in the world. A permaculture food forest is an easy way to get deep nutrition in an otherwise toxic landscape. Whether your family's health is a concern or you're worried about rising food costs, this strategy session can help you. Get a food forest no matter what size your property is. Access to delicious, nutritious food is your birthright. Reclaim it. Where we'll meet is on the phone initially to determine whether it's a fit between us. We'll gather information about your property and you can ask us questions. What you'll gain is straightforward strategies to transform your property's issues into abundantly healthy and productive land that will feed you and your family indefinitely. The food forest has been recognized internationally as the most efficient land restoration and food production system in the world.
So much information.
Great.
But it really, like, and I have this built-in ability to just know when a thing is true, you know? I know when it's not, and this was like, okay, this is it. Yeah, this makes sense. And then that Q drop on top, because I just started listening to this stuff this week, and the Q drop was like exactly what Charlie Freak was saying.
Yeah, so there is, I think that everything Q is saying really resonates. You just know, and I've been doing independent research since I started the main book I'm working on, Zombie Permaculture, back in 2009, and it's taken this long because I've been hit with so much evidence to support my thesis. I can't quite, I don't know what to do with it all. And all of Q stuff is definitely supporting my thesis. So it's like, oh God, but yeah, so this is awesome. I'm excited. I think we're gonna have a great conversation. Great. So today we are doing a collaborative show. This is Dr. Corey and I am Zombie Permaculture, and we're gonna be doing a show on the deep state health crisis and its natural enemies. That's what we decided to title this. And we're gonna be basically sharing from our respective professions and finding those connection points, which if you've watched any of my shows and interviews, you'll know that's kind of my role that I've taken. And so I want to start with you, Dr. Corey. Welcome, and thanks for being with us. And why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about what kind of doctor you are and what your practice is all about?
Yeah, I'm really excited to be doing this because this topic is something I'm so passionate about, and I talk about it all the time anyway. And I know so many people are interested in hearing about it. So I am by license, I'm a chiropractor, and I specialize in what we call holistic nutrition. It's an alternative nutrition technique that I do called nutrition response testing. And I'm not going to go into the details of how that works, but if people are interested, I'm happy to answer any questions. Let's just say it's a really effective way of helping people optimize their health, and that's really what my entire purpose is. In addition to that, I also teach other doctors and other holistic practitioners how to do that. I teach about nutrition. I teach about how to help people to be able to improve their health, because when it comes to, let's say, for example, cleaning up your diet, it's not that easy, and we'll be talking about some of the reasons why people struggle with doing that so much. You can't just tell somebody, hey, this is bad for you, don't eat it. People are addicted to the chemicals in their food. So we have a way of helping people to be able to improve their diet that's very effective. So prior to the COVID, I was traveling around the country teaching different types of practitioners how to do this, and practitioners of all kinds. We even have some medical doctors that attend our seminars. So we have chiropractors and acupuncturists and medical doctors, dentists, veterinarians, because animals are people too, and they need the same. And I'm sorry if my dogs will occasionally bark during the filming of this, but I tried to give them a raw bone to keep them quiet, but they bark anyway. And we have just, you name it. We have all kinds of different practitioners getting interested in truly being able to help restore health. I just want to say real quick that the United States right now does not actually have a health care system. We have a sick care system. We have a symptom suppression system. We don't actually create health in bodies. So that is the issue, and that is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how did we get to this point of being so sick, and what it is that we can do about it.
Awesome, thank you. And I'm, I definitely feel it's so funny that you approached me to do this show, because you didn't know what I do when you did that, but it turns out there's a really strong alignment with what I do professionally. And so I'm excited to talk about those connections. I agree completely. And so what I do is permaculture design, and I've been a professional designer for almost 17 years now. And if you don't know what permaculture is, or if the viewers don't know what it is, it's essentially a deep ecological design system. And I have a graduate degree also in landscape architecture, so my specialty has always been to combine the two, which I was told by clients who found me online. I've never advertised in all that time. People have just found me, and they told me, wow, no one else is putting these two together. This is great. This is what we want. So basically, I kind of, even if the client I'm working with doesn't want an ecological design because they don't know about it, or they weren't really kind of thinking about that, I'll sort of slip it in under the radar. I'll hide ecology in their landscape where they don't need to necessarily see it for it to be working. So my main goal is to restore any kind of site to a functioning ecology again. And believe it or not, that can be done with permaculture. Permaculture is amazing. If people haven't heard of it, it can basically reclaim the Sahara Desert. So this idea that the planet is being desertified and it's unstoppable and yada, 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 that's a complete lie. We can absolutely grow food in the Sahara Desert. We can capture and store what water does fall. It's amazing. So what I think the connection points are between what you do and what I do, Dr. Corey, is really looking at health from a more holistic, systemic perspective. And so this will all come up as we talk, kind of, I can see all these points coming together. But yeah, essentially, I definitely agree that there is I was telling you that my role is I want to bring in that connection to the deep state, to what would seem like disparate fields of thought. So, what does a holistic doctor have to do with the deep state attack on the United States and on democracy and on freedom in the world? We're going to talk about that. And what permaculture designer, how does that even connect? What does that have to do with the deep state? We're going to talk about that today.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah. And so I want to kind of start out with something that you had mentioned to me that I've been thinking about. I think a lot of us have been thinking about, and that's this video that these doctors, board certified doctors, they had a summit in Washington, D.C. not too long ago. I think it was just this last week. And they were basically saying, we've gathered here in Washington, D.C. to alert the public that there is a cure for COVID-19, and it's HCQ and zinc. And they've been treating hundreds of patients, and it's been working. And even one of them said no one has to die. And then, of course, it was immediately censored by Twitter, Facebook, and their website was removed from the internet. And so I wanted to just start there, because I know you have some opinions on that. So tell us what you were kind of beginning to tell me.
Well, I know that hydroxychloroquine is not dangerous. So I've had, before COVID, I've had patients that have been taking it for years for lupus, for rheumatoid arthritis, I had a patient that had malaria. She was born in India, and people have taken that medication successfully for many years. So the denial of HCQ as a treatment has nothing to do with illness or health or the actual medication itself. That's been very clear all along. I also have had many, not my patients, because my patients, we use natural stuff, but family members of patients put on it before it was banned by the government. Family members of patients were taking it successfully and doing well. The reason that it works, if you just study the physiology, the mechanism of the medication, so zinc is a mineral that all bodies need. You can't really survive well without it. I just want to mention here about zinc. I find minerals fascinating. I can talk all day about minerals. I'm like kind of a nerd when it comes to minerals, but I can make them come alive. So zinc is required by the pancreas. The pancreas produces insulin, right? So for people that have diabetes, if they're zinc deficient, their pancreas is going to have a harder time producing insulin and dealing with sugar. Sometimes people are diabetic because they have a zinc deficiency, right? Pancreas is certainly not the only organ in the body that needs zinc. The prostate is a very large user of zinc. Your eyes need zinc, your hair, skin, nails. I mean, there's everything, every part of you needs zinc in different amounts. But I just want to focus on the pancreas because diabetics do more poorly with coronavirus. And that has to do, I think, it has to do with zinc. So zinc stops the replication of coronavirus in the body, right? So if you have adequate amount of zinc in your body, you're less likely to get sick or to get very sick. And if you're diabetic and you're already zinc deficient, you're much more likely to get very sick. And the way HCQ works, and I'm just going to put it like I'm going to break it down really simply. I'm not going into the whole scientific chemical physiology, but just HCQ helps to push zinc into the cells. It's that simple. And, so the studies that were done that showed it didn't work, a lot of them have already been debunked, and you can't do these studies on very, very sick people in end stages of an illness. I mean, anytime you do a study on end stages of an illness in a very sick or elderly population, you're going to see a worse result. So that VA study that was done, and God rest the souls of those vets that passed away, but that is still being used as the standard for deciding that HCQ doesn't work. It's almost silly. It's just almost silly.
So much of what we've been watching is just silly. That's a good word for it. It's so ridiculous that anyway. And I always like to frame it like this: if people are not watching and the actual, so I'm assuming that most Americans didn't take the 3 or 4 hours time it took the other day to watch the quote unquote hearing, where AG Barr, the Attorney General of the United States, was sort of put on trial by the House Judiciary Committee. Most people didn't watch that, right? They're going to listen to the news snippets later and the commentary about it, right? And most people don't probably actually listen to Donald Trump speak. They probably just watch the news, and we all know what that leads to, right? So it is really silly if you're actually watching. If you're actually paying attention, or you're reading the drops, or whatever, then you're like, oh yeah, this is ridiculous. The level of censorship and fake polls and fake studies that were used that were debunked already, and just all of it. So I think that's an important point. The mainstream public I think Tucker Carlson, one of the things that Q pointed us to the other day was a show that Tucker Carlson did about that, that most people are probably pretty decent people, and they're smart, but they're just, they're not aware because they're not actually listening at the source.
Right, which is all by design.
Yes.
And that's kind of what, in a way, I want to talk about how we got to that point, how we got to the point of just being spoon-fed, whether it's poison in food or water or the air, or spoon-fed poison in media. How did we get to the point where we just sit there and take it? Where we just allow ourselves to be fed poison in the body, poison in the mind, and not ever examine it?
I think that's what we should definitely focus on for the majority of this conversation. It's something that we both very much agree on. And I wanted to just really quick bring something up about zinc. You were talking about being a mineral nerd. I love that. Zinc. So I think that, this was covered a little bit in mainstream media, but it's funny because I have this theory about how media they bury stuff by reporting it once if they're going to report something, and then you kind of just subconsciously believe that it's been taken care of if it's not still in the news, quote unquote, right? Well, back when it got coverage maybe some years ago now, the soils are depleted and the nutrients aren't in the soils anymore, da 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 da. Well, that's definitely still happening. What permaculture allows you to do is completely restore your soil health. And restore the vitamin content in your soil, restore the actual physical profile of the soil so that you can have habitat niches for all the myriad organisms, both microscopic and macroscopic. So positive beneficial beetles and spiders and all those things that actually make up a healthy soil. And the nutrients can then be brought up from deep in the soil by like mycorrhizae, mycelium. This is like a fungal, component. All of that. It helps us have that zinc in our food supply, right? But that's
where it comes from. That's where minerals come from the soil.
Exactly.
And I don't have to tell you, the soils are, completely depleted in this country, at least. I can't speak for other countries. Some countries they are, some countries they aren't. And it's one of the things I was going to hit on, the combination of petroleum-based fertilizers and glyphosate, which kills all the microorganisms in the soil and hence the minerals. They're just depleted. Plus the not rotating crops and all of that is part of why we have so much nutritional deficiency in the body.
Yeah, and there's really, this is, like you said, this could take 8 hours to talk. Yeah. There's so much to this, but Monsanto, which was now bought by Bayer, which could have been partially a move to remove that name from our consciousness because it was getting such bad press. But we're going to keep talking about Monsanto. But they have Terminator technology. They literally called it that, and that's what it does. It basically, the Roundup products, do not buy those, you guys. If you are seeing this, completely boycott any of those products because what they contain is genetically engineered Terminator technology, which means that seeds cannot reproduce without you buying and being permanently dependent on Monsanto's Roundup Ready product line. And there's never been any kind of test to see what the long-term effects of putting seeds into the environment that terminate without this product. Is that going to spread to other seeds and somehow make them terminate? We don't know. This is our global food supply.
I think it will. I don't see how we can stop it.
Well, and also if you look at, the movie Food Inc., I would highly recommend everybody watch that if you haven't already seen it. But they go into this where back a while ago now, Monsanto was actually successfully, they have an army of lawyers, of course, suing organic farms that were surrounding their big factory farms. And the way that they were doing this, and somehow the United States court system, actually I don't have to say somehow now because we know they're infiltrated by the deep state, was letting these cases get approved. But basically all these organic farms got put out of business because the wind would blow the pollen off of the GMO Roundup Ready Terminator crops onto the organic farms, thereby polluting the organic but instead of it being like where the organic farms got to sue Monsanto for destroying should have been pure. It was the other way around. Monsanto was able to sue them for quote unquote stealing their patented terminator technology. It's totally, goes back to the ridiculous thing. It's silly. It's a level of silliness and ridiculousness that if you're paying attention, you're like, wait a minute, what? No, that doesn't make any sense. So it is systemic and it is major and it's coming from all sides. And I'm actually writing a book about this, another one of my books that I have in the works. But yeah, it's a big, big deal. So let's talk more about being spoon-fed the poison. I know you wanted to get onto that, and I think that's a great topic.
So I want to just do a very brief general history of how, first of all, how pharmaceuticals came to be the approach for handling illness in bodies, because it just seems like people just take for granted that's what you do when you're sick. You take a drug to fix it, right? So I want to just start with how pharmaceuticals came into being the modern way of handling things and why that doesn't work. And then we can also talk about how illness is actually being created in bodies. So starting with the two approaches to looking at how illness develops. And one is called the germ theory, which is was developed by Louis Pasteur. And then the other one is called the terrain theory, which is Beauchamp. And the germ theory is what it sounds like, that you get sick because you get exposure to germs. The terrain theory says, no, it's not the germs that make you sick. It's the ill health, lack of balance inside your body that allows things to cause illness or creates illness in your body. So looking all the way back in history, sanitation played a huge role in exposing, or lack of sanitation played a huge role in exposing people to pathogens. And sanitation, I don't know why I'm also fascinated by sanitation history. It's just such a
sanitation nerd.
A dirty topic.
Dirty topic. I love it.
A dirty topic. But you know, so even in prehistoric and ancient civilizations, sanitation existed. There were pipelines. People knew that, you know, human waste was somehow not good and you shouldn't be exposed to it. And everything kind of broke down in the medieval times, right? So people would just, you know, take a poop in the street and everything. Water was dirty. There were, you know, countries where people didn't even drink water. They just drank beer because water was so dirty. At least the alcohol would, you know, disinfect whatever it was that was in the beer. And so there were plagues, and this really started, you know, with farming, settled farming about 10,000 years ago, and then just became worse and worse, where there were plagues of malaria and leprosy and smallpox and the bubonic plague, of course, were all pathogenic disease, all caused by things like raw sewage and dirty, you know, animals.
I wanted to jump in really quick with that. There's something that I saw on the news the other day, and it was the deep state mainstream fake news media, and they were saying that, oh no, there's a resurgence of the bubonic plague in squirrels. Yeah. And of course, it was something designed to make everybody freak out about, quote unquote, the next big event, the next big pandemic. But if you read and you looked a little deeper, you found that that's actually normal, that every year.
It happens every year.
Yeah, and so like, but if you think about that, that supports what you're saying, because we have sanitation guidelines now. We have a lot of things in place that prevent that from totally turning into this big apocalyptic outbreak again, right? Of the bubonic plague, right?
Right. Plus antibiotics now.
Yeah.
But right. So it wasn't really until the mid 1800s that modern sanitation was installed in cities in the US and Europe. And I'm looking down at notes because I don't have all of the dates memorized. And so the mid 1800s sanitation was put into place, and the late 1800s flush toilets became popular. So this was helping to control outbreaks of typhoid and cholera. And by the 20th century, most most of the Western world has sewage treatment and clean drinking water. The drinking water is treated. But I just want to say there's still billions of people in the world that don't live in countries with an infrastructure, sanitation, or clean water. And about 18 billion people worldwide drink water that is contaminated by feces.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's delicious. But even so, what happens to your feces when you go in the bathroom and flush the toilet? Where does it go? I mean, these are things that people just don't think about, right? You just take everything for granted. You turn on a faucet, you have water coming out. You don't think about where is it coming from, what's in it. You go to the bathroom, flush it, and you don't think about where is it going, where does it end up, right? It actually ends up going into like rivers and oceans and stuff. So, you know, it's kind of like, yes, they end up cleaning it when it gets into your reservoir, but then here's a question: what do they clean it with?
Yeah.
What is your water cleaned with? What is the water coming out of your faucet? How has it been treated?
Yeah.
And they're putting chemicals in it that are possibly carcinogenic.
Well, we know,
especially in high levels.
Yeah, we know. I mean, we know that most of the water supply in the United States is treated with the chemical byproduct of aluminum manufacturing. If you just think
right,
about
aluminum
fluoride,
sulfate.
yeah,
Right.
what is fluoride? You know, they've got all the dentists on board.
Right.
Yeah, and it's it's very disturbing. You know, I've got
right.
a fluoride filter.
Yeah, so do I. Fluoride actually does strengthen teeth, but you shouldn't need fluoride to strengthen your teeth if you're healthy and you're eating foods that promote healthy teeth, which we will get to and we'll talk about. And fluoride is toxic. It is cancer causing. They also use chlorine to treat water, and chlorine in small amounts is okay, but how much of it are you drinking? And then here's something else. They actually treat water with ozone, which creates a byproduct called bromate. And bromate is carcinogenic. Bromate is also in your wheat in the United States. It's banned in many other countries, but it's in your wheat and it's in your water, and it causes cancer and other health issues. So I'm actually going to cover that because so many people eat a lot of wheat.
Well, and wheat is pushed on us. Wheat is
right.
This is where you get into like the systemic, you know, and I'm really interested in this because it is actually, I think it's an absolute conspiracy. And to say that it's not part of this deep state agenda, I just would disagree. I think that it's my book is about how we're being hit from all sides intentionally. And so I'm really fascinated by this because I, like you, have been paying attention, and I don't have the medical background that you do, but I've been watching, and my mom gave me this list years ago of all the ingredients, the questionable ingredients in most things, and like all kinds of cosmetics and all kinds of products that you would just see in a normal store. And yeah. It's a really great list. I'll try to find it for you guys and link it, but it has the ingredient, and then it tells you what it does to you. And we're talking about causes birth deformities, causes cancer. These are, I mean, brain issues, stuff like that. If you read this list, you'd be shocked at what is in these products. And why do these ingredients need to be in these products? Why do we need, first of all, I gotta say, for the fluoride, if we're not supposed to cook in aluminum cookware because it's toxic for us, why in the world, if you're not supposed to swallow toothpaste or cook in aluminum cooker, would you want to, why are they having us swallow the water? How does that affect your teeth? I've never understood that. If you want to swish it around in your mouth and around your teeth, that makes sense, right? I guess.
Well, it can still get absorbed through your mouth and your gums, your skin, the mucous membranes are permeable. But my point is, you don't actually need it if you're healthy, right? So in indigenous populations that are untouched by processed foods, not that there's many left, but when there was still, I wasn't even going to talk about this, but it's a perfect example. There was a dentist, there was a few dentists in the 1940s who started to notice that the teeth and the jaws of their patients were changing. And this kind of happened, what appeared to be rather suddenly. Teeth started being crooked and less healthy, and the jaw and the palate actually started narrowing in the 1940s. And one of these dentists, whose name is Dr. Weston A. Price, started to do some research and trying to understand what was happening. And one of the things he ended up doing was traveling around the world and studying the diets of different populations. And he went to many different indigenous tribes at that time, which were untouched, like the Maori, which were untouched by modern civilized processed foods. And he studied their diets, and he studied their teeth and their jaws. And he realized that processed food was causing nutritional deficiency, which is affecting the teeth and the bone structure. And that was the first thing that was easily noticed, right? Because it's right in front of your face, literally. So he wrote a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And in that book, so if you're somebody that doesn't like to read very much, that book is full of photographs. He took photographs of the mouths and teeth of the peoples that he was studying, but he also went to so-called civilized, studied so-called civilized populations and studied their diets and took pictures of their mouth and teeth too. So you have, like, let's say Maori that were still living in, not in a city where they were eating a traditional diet, a traditional Maori diet. And then you have some that did migrate into the cities, and you compare their mouth and teeth. So you can see the difference. And food did start, processed food started really coming into play in the 1920s when refrigerators became more widely available to the population. So this guy, Weston A. Price, this dentist, started to notice it in the 40s. It took one generation of eating processed food for a change to occur in the bone structure of humans. And the point is, though, that if you eat a nutrient-rich diet, you don't need fluoride.
And they've kind of set up this problem. This is common, right? You create a problem and then you solve it, right? That's classic business methodology. Right. And the problem they've created is they're the ones that are depleting the soil, so there are less nutrients available to us from our food. Right. And then they're giving us these, these sort of like, you need this product for your, so your neighbors will like you and you'll look better or whatever. And so you'll have the nutrition you weren't getting from your food anymore, and it's sort of like accepted, like this is just how it is. This is normal. But when you take a permaculture approach, you can get back to bringing those nutrients back from deep in the soil where they're not accessible in a bad. I don't know where you're from, Dr. Corey, but I'm in the LA County area right now, and I've been on the West Coast most of my life. I've done a little traveling, but in LA County, I consistently notice that the soil here, if you've ever visited, you'll see this too. It's not soil, it's hard pan. It is like a desiccated powder that's so compacted, if you were to put water on it, it would beat up on the surface and run off. And almost nowhere is it being, I would say nowhere, is it being intentionally covered. And one of my biggest goals whenever I look at a property is to cover the ground, get it covered. Because if you can cover it with ground covers, even if you can just get mulch on it until the plants can cover it, that's the beginning. I want to talk about weeds a little bit here. And I want to get back to what you were saying for sure, but I feel like this is an important kind of connection point that I want to make. Weed, the definition of a weed is just a plant that a human being doesn't want in the location where it's being found. It doesn't mean that it's an inherently bad plant at all. It's just, you know, we've all been taught like, this is a plant and this is a weed. You get rid of the weeds and you keep the quote unquote plant, right? Well, that really overlooks the earth's process, a natural regenerative process. And by the way, I will say the theory of entropy is completely bogus. Entropy is the idea that everything is naturally going to go into decline if left alone. That's absolutely not true. It's a complete lie fostered on us in our education system and our textbooks. It's absolute just BS. The actual movement of the natural movement of the entire universe is towards growth and expansion and evolution. And we can see that if you look at a garden. If you just watch, if you watch a plot of untouched land, if you just keep looking at it, plants, there'll be seeds in the soil, you'll get a rain, you know, seeds will sprout, plants will start to come up, they will start doing their best to cover the ground, they'll loosen the soil a little bit for other plants, you'll start to get bigger, different kinds of plants that'll come in, you'll start to get insect populations, you'll get earthworms, etc. And if you just leave it alone, it will become a forest. And what we call that is the move towards the climax ecosystem. And a climax ecosystem is the height of productivity. It's going to feed the most species, including humans. It's going to provide the most shelter for the most species. It's basically what the earth, the natural ecosystem of the earth is at its height, right? We don't allow that in our modern culture and society. Our landscapes are just completely desecrated. They are, you know, monocultures and these invasive lawns, and you have to high inputs, and of course Roundup, you know, all over everything. So I want to put that in there, because if we think about, you know, a garden, it's so funny, like it's something as simple as a garden it's almost like the most empowering thing that you can do in a way to regain your health. And I think that you can't just rely on that now because of how far we've come in terms of everything being destroyed. You have to also rely on holistic natural medicine like you're talking about. But I've been trying to advocate. I haven't done the best job of advocating, but I have a Google, what do you call it when you get an alert? Google alerts, where anytime the victory garden as a term comes up. And I've noticed that it's been increasing and increasing because, you know, of the pandemic and the shutdown of grocery stores and all of that. So I really just think, you know, we need to think about this systemically and holistically. We live in a living biosphere on a planet that naturally feeds us and shelters us and waters us, you know. So I just want to keep tying that back, that the body is a microcosm of what the earth is, and we are intricately and intimately tied together. So
yes, both materially and energetically, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Even if you don't want to look at the woo-woo energy stuff, just look at electromagnetic energy and electromagnetic fields, which everything on the planet has. And your body has it, and the planet has it, and all the plants and all the foods and animals and everything has an electromagnetic field. And right now, the electromagnetic fields of the earth is actually healing.
Yeah.
It's one of the things. So the earth provides us, or is supposed to be providing us, with air, food, water, sunlight, and electromagnetic field. Those are the things that your body needs to survive and thrive. And right now, the electromagnetic field is essentially cut off, and unless you're living in the woods, it's cut off from you, between the dirty electromagnetic fields from cell phone towers, from devices, buildings, concrete, rubber-soled shoes. All of those things block your ability to receive the electromagnetic field from the earth, and which is optimally 7.83 hertz. And I don't even want to tell you what cell phone towers are. And it's 5G. 5G is like billions of hertz, like 5 billion. So
yeah,
it's extremely biologically abnormal.
Absolutely. And the whole 5G thing, good God, oh my God. I mean, if it wasn't obvious that this was intentional before, it should be now with 5G. It's like it jumps in scale, and the amount of bombardment we're being put under, like a lot. It's not just the next step up. It's like, you know, times more. I just want to insert, we're talking about our professions and what we do. I'm also trained at the master's level in ancient Egyptian applied physics, and what the ancient Egyptians understood how to do and what I'm trained to do is to actually design objects instead of, landscapes, but design actual objects that you can wear or carry or put in your home that effectively transmute the wave of the EMF radiation waveform. It's actually transmuted. And when you were talking about the good energy coming off of the electromagnetic energy coming out of the earth that's healing for us and that protects us, and that's been cut off, the way that the Egyptians understood that is the electromagnetic waveform, it has a vertical and a horizontal component. So it's traveling through space in these two kind of vectors. And so off of nature, off of all of the leaves and plants and everything, there's this horizontal, and it's allied with the magnetic, but it's much more focused on that. It's very, very beneficial and healing. And that's why I always tell people, they're always surprised to hear this, but it is absolutely fact-based. Any area where there is less green and plant material and foliage, the crime rate is increased. You can look this up, and I encourage you guys to do so, right? It's just a direct link. But so that's because
is depression, the rates of depression and anxiety are increased.
I totally believe that. And it's because coming off of all plant matter are waves of energy that are very calming and healing to the human psyche. And this is actually a fact. So the vertical component is very, very toxic, and that's aligned with the electrical part of it. And what I do allows me to sort of transmute is it sort of collapses that vertical component to the point where it's not dangerous anymore. And it enhances that horizontal component. So it's a science, design science that is focused on objects. And I'm very interested in this 5G because they have the masters who developed this design science have actually developed, they keep working, it's an empirically derived kind of science, but they have found there are certain geometries and whatnot and proportions, and there's all kind of scales we apply that actually do work on the 5G. So not to panic, you can actually protect yourself, and this is verified stuff. This is not just some, bunch of orgonite in a crystal or something.
There's a lot of published studies on pulsed electromagnetic field mats and their efficacy. So they actually, I have a mat. I have one in my house. I have one in my office that I let patients use that produce the right frequency for your body to interact with your body. And it's extremely healing. So that's one thing that actually helps your body to be able to deal with the dirty electromagnetic fields. And then, like you, I have stuff in my house. I have a scalar energy. It's called a rest shield that I have that literally you can see it's working, because if you put it next to plants, they grow better. And if you put your water next to it, it tastes better. So it actually changes the molecular structure of living things in a good way. And that's something else, another topic I wanted to go into as far as water and its molecular structure, but I want to get back to that. So I just want to, I want to pose this question, which is that if you, let's just say you were a bad person, you were evil, and you wanted to take the population of a planet and weaken them and sicken them and dumb them down so that you could better control them, how would you do it? How could you do it very insidiously so that you didn't have resistance, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Putting that question out there, right?
Yep, that's what my book is about, basically.
Right. So looking back into history, with the advent of the sanitation infrastructures and then the discovery of antibiotics. So we kind of solved the major cause of death in our population back in the 19th and early 20th century was infection, right? So also the introduction of hand washing, especially during childbirth, reduced the infant mortality rate and also the death of the mom that was giving birth. So So with the introduction of antibiotics, it was like a miracle that you could save people's lives when they were exposed to pathogens. And keeping in mind the terrain theory that if the body is not healthy, it's going to be more affected by exposure to a pathogen, right? So that just basically the stronger your immune system is, the less likely you are to get sick. And how do you strengthen your immune system is the question that we're going to lead up to an answer to that.
And we see this with COVID-19, how most of the people, like 50% of deaths are in nursing homes, and most deaths are elderly people. So that, yeah, I mean, what do they have? They have a less strong immune system because they're older, and they've probably been ingesting poisons their whole lives.
Right, exactly. I was going to say they've been exposed to. So if processed food was introduced into this country really like heavily in the 1920s. So how old are people right now who were born in the 1920s? They're like, what, 100, right? And so they've been eating that, many of them, not everyone. In this country, we have a lot of people who have migrated from other countries. So they actually were raised on better food. So their bodies were made out of better stuff, depending on where they were raised. I particularly find trends in, because by the way, I'm located in New York. So I have people, New York City. So I have people coming to me from all over the world. My patients represent every country. And I notice trends in health with people that were born in different countries and how easily they recover from illness or injury or stress. So anyway, the introduction of antibiotics in the 1930s, and then the antibiotics were also introduced into the confined feeding operations on farms, right, into the animals. So animals that were raised for food, all animals, so chickens and cows and pigs, all of them that were in these confined feeding operations were starting to be given antibiotics in the 1940s. So what that meant is that now the food supply had antibiotics in it, right? So whether or not you as a human were taking in antibiotics because you were sick, whether or not you were doing that, you were taking them in your food.
Yeah.
Which is how we got to the point we're at today with the super bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics.
I have a question about that. So whenever you hear the radical vegan attack, I don't know if you've been attacked, I've been attacked before, where they say like, you can't eat any animal products or you're evil or you're going to die, blah, 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 blah. Well, I respect where they're coming from. I wish that it was that simple. I always try to say, hey, for those of you who are being attacked and you're not quite ready to make that full switch, you can always source humanely raised and harvested animal products, which is going to make a huge difference. I would be curious what you would say to that, Dr. Corey. Are the humanely, like the certified humane label, does that allow the antibiotics in, or does it keep it out?
Well, you want to make sure that what you're eating, it specifically says antibiotic and hormone free, and then you want to make sure that the animals are being fed food that they're supposed to eat. So in other words, cows are supposed to eat grass, chickens are supposed to be pecking off the ground. So in a perfect world, that would be happening. So on let's say organic farms where they're raising the cows to eat grass, depending on their location, grass is not always available. 12 months a year, let's say it's winter, the ground is frozen, there's no grass available. And then you want to know, well, what are they feeding them in the winter? What are the chickens eating when they can't peck off the ground? So I get my food from an Amish farm where I can talk to the farmer and ask him, like, what are you feeding your chickens? What do you feed? Or I could go to the farm and actually see for myself. But I want to say, I'm just looking up notes that I have about animal protein versus
Well,
versus plant, getting the protein out of plants.
Yeah, the amount of energy it takes to extract the
Right.
calories and the nutrients from the animals is like
Right.
nuts. It's a destructive pattern.
Right, and animal protein is much more highly absorbable. There's also not, so proteins are made out of amino acids, and there's a whole bunch of amino acids that your body needs, and you need all of them. You need all of them to be healthy. Your muscles are made out of protein, your heart's made out of protein. Every cell in your body needs protein to function. So the only source of protein that has all the amino acids in it is animal. Now, that does not mean that you can't get all your amino acids from plants, but it is very complicated. You have to eat 5 different plant sources, and you have to know what they are and which ones have which amino acids and combine them. And then even then, it's much more difficult, as you said, to extract the protein from the plants and to absorb it. So it is very difficult to eat all of your amino acids from plants. And I do have a lot of vegan patients that over the long term don't do as well. So getting back to your question though, you definitely, this is part of taking responsibility for your health. You definitely want to know where your animals are coming from, what they've been fed, and you want to make sure that they're not being injected with antibiotics or fed antibiotics or hormones. Okay, so we're going to get to the hormones because that's a Monsanto thing. But just getting back to the whole antibiotic thing, I just want to bring you up to date on a timeline with that, which is very interesting. So in the 1930s and 40s, when antibiotics became the miracle solution for illness, and it really was at that time, they developed this model, or let's say the expansion of this model, that the best way to treat illness is by discovery of and development of drugs, of pharmaceuticals. And that is the route that got taken, right? So for any ailment, for anything that might go wrong in your body, let's find a drug that can handle it. Now, the problem with that is that drugs don't actually fix anything. Pharmaceuticals don't fix anything. So for example, if you have high blood pressure and you take a drug that lowers your blood pressure, if you stop that drug, you're still going to have the high blood pressure. It's not fixing the cause of the high blood pressure, it's just forcing your body into an unnatural reaction and suppressing the symptom. In doing so, it's creating side effects. There's no such thing as a drug without a side effect. So in the case that I'm talking about high blood pressure, usually it damages the kidney because the kidney produces a hormone that is involved in regulating blood pressure. So they've developed this model of you have, an itch. Here's a drug to put on the itch. You have hiccups. Oh, here's a drug to stop your hiccups. You're sad. Oh, here's a drug to make you happy. And the medications, the pharmaceuticals that got developed became more and more toxic over time, more and more harmful, more and more side effects, so that you needed more drugs to handle the side effects of the drugs, right? Now, fast forward to today, most illness is not from infection because we have our sanitation systems in place, and people will just take antibiotics if they get an infection. Most deaths are not due to infection. What are most deaths due to? Heart disease, complications of diabetes, cancer.
Well, and with the COVID-19, I read the document that was delivered to health professionals in medical centers around the country. It was several months ago now. I read it, and it said, anytime you see anyone die, you write down COVID-19. You guess. There was no test. You just guess. Based on your observation or your guess, you will write down COVID-19. That was the directive and the order. And we know that there's other corruption in the C-19 kind of whole all these fake numbers and, oh, over-reported. Well, so if you had heart disease and you died from a car accident, they put down COVID-19, and I saw the proof. So
No,
it's
I
not
actually
just a
know
conspiracy
people
theory.
that happened to.
Yeah, it's like, so all these numbers, I do want to make sure that we are bringing those connection points in, because this is really relevant. I want to show people how it's relevant. I want to tie that back to for people, so that if they're not making those links, that we can help them see those connections. So what you're talking about is that, I want to relate that to COVID-19. If you have a healthy immune system, you're not gonna. I literally don't know anyone, and you're a doctor, so you probably do, who has even gotten sick. The only thing I've ever heard is one of my old neighbors had a friend who had COVID-19 early on in the pandemic and was in the hospital, and then they survived. That's it. I haven't heard of anybody else getting sick, or for that matter, dying. And I know I have friends most of my friends are a lot older than me, in their 50s and 60s and that kind of thing. So even among them.
Well, I'm 57. Just saying. I don't think of myself as old, though.
You look healthy.
Yeah, I try. That's what I do. So yeah, I did have patients that apparently tested positive and were symptomatic. I believe I had it myself. So last July, my mom passed away, and it was a rough time for me, obviously, and more difficult than I expected it to be. And I had to clean her apartment out, and it took me 5 months, and it was very stressful. I didn't have a day off for 5 months. And 4 days after I finished, I got sick, and I almost never get sick. And it was December. And in retrospect, I had all the symptoms of, what they say COVID-19 symptoms are. But here's the thing, right? So I had a lot of patients that, well, I won't say a lot, but let's say 20 out of, 200 patients that tested positive and were symptomatic, but we got them on supplements right away, and they did fine. They all did fine. The worst case was a diabetic who was, a new patient, and still he didn't end up in the hospital. But, every single year that I've been in practice, which is over 19 years now, there's been a flu season. And I've seen sick people, very similar to what I saw this year. In fact, the 2017-2018 flu season, I saw many more sick people. And it went on far longer than what I saw this year with this particular, I don't even like to call it COVID, it's a coronavirus. Coronavirus is a virus that can cause flu-like symptoms and or cold-like symptoms. And it's been around for, forever. And so whether or not people had it worse this year is very difficult to kind of go back over and figure out what was real and what wasn't, because there was so much.
Yeah, and I make a point, of bringing up the death rate over and over, because it's just not being discussed. Of course, the mainstream is pushing, oh, the cases, they're going up, oh God, and they're creating this huge panic, and everybody's just freaked out. You guys, we're testing more. The death rate is what we should be paying attention to. Most people do not even get sick who test positive for coronavirus. They have no symptoms, which means you're walking around normal, you feel fine, right? And then the people who do get symptoms, the people who actually die from this, the death rate is like 0.02%, you guys. It is so tiny. I have a graph I'll put into this video that shows the cases are going up, and it's, oh God, scary. And that's what the media is showing you, but they're not showing you the other line, which is the death rate, which is going down.
Okay, and here's something that drives me crazy that I never hear anyone talking about, and I keep trying to get this point out there. This is the most widely tested virus in the history of mankind. How do you know? How does any one of us know for sure that if we didn't do this all the time, that we would have the same result? Coronavirus is very common. And the test that they're doing is not for COVID, it's for coronavirus. So chances are we've all been exposed. I think every year most of us get exposed to whatever influenza virus is in the, going around that year. And so if you keep testing people, you're going to keep finding positives. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. If you have a good immune system, it will develop antibodies and you will not be sick. And if there's a lot of viruses. Viruses are a part of this planet. There's many of them. If I tested everyone for every single virus that exists on this planet, chances are that you're going to show positive for a lot of them. What does that mean? What relevance does it have?
I think this is a huge point, and I'm really glad you brought this up, because one thing that you said was something I didn't know, and that is that the test for COVID-19 is actually not testing for COVID-19, it's testing for coronavirus. And this
says it on the CDC website.
Amazing. It's so funny how if you go to the CDC website, you can learn so many things that the nation is not telling. But I want to, that's really important. And I also, I think this is totally misunderstood as well. C19, COVID-19 is literally not that's not the name of the virus itself. That's just the name of the suite of symptoms that they think are related to what the virus is. Actually, the name of it is SARS-CoV-2. And so they have listed COVID-19 as a set of symptoms that they have attributed to this version of coronavirus. They originally called it the novel coronavirus, right? SARS-CoV-2. So this is really, what you just said is like you dropped the bomb. I don't think most people realize that the test is actually testing for any old coronavirus you might have, instead of just the SARS-CoV-2 virus that everybody calls COVID-19 that we're all freaking out about.
I screenshot it in case it went away.
Will you send it to me and we'll put it in the video?
Yeah, sure. It said that if you test positive, it might mean that you had exposure and you have antibodies. It might mean you had a cold.
Oh my God. Yeah, and I mean, even this is so funny too, because on the box, there's this huge mask controversy, and we have mask holes out there telling everybody they need to wear a mask, and you're endangering everyone as well. Actually, Dr. Fauci himself said in an interview, I watched it, masks are for show. So now he's reversed his opinion and says you need to have a face shield and goggles. Come on.
Goggles,
come on, man. Give me a break. But anyway, I want to do some graphics for this, because this is important. You can screenshot these graphics and turn them into memes and drop them in threads. And my favorite thing to do, I don't know where you guys are dropping your memes, but I started following, and it made me want to throw up, but I started following Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom and all these just corrupt politicians, essentially. And so I put the notification bell, and every time they post something, it shows up in my thread, and that gives me the opportunity to go in there and drop memes, because that's really where I see memes need to go. Like, that's where these people are out there with their big following, just disinforming everyone and projecting all their crimes onto Donald Trump, etc. So that's where I drop that stuff. So just a little hint, a little suggestion. I'm sure you guys are doing your memes awesome, and it's great, but I want to suggest that you take a screenshot of some of these really kind of information-rich graphics that we'll be trying to share during this show when I do the editing, and drop those memes into those threads so that those people have to deal with it and their audience sees those things, because they're not being exposed to this stuff.
Yeah, kind of wish I didn't put my actual name as on my Twitter account. I would have been more comfortable being able to do that. Yeah.
Now you know why I do the best I can to kind of just.
That was smart. I didn't. When I went on to, I just only joined Twitter, I think, in April, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea what it was going to turn into, and that's my place now. That's my place.
Yeah, I joined just a couple months ago as well. It's a pretty new account, but I mean, this is a consolation. I don't think we are big enough accounts yet to really be on their radar. They're trying to take down praying medic.
Well, I intend to be a big enough account. That's my goal. So I just wanted to tie in this whole, so the theme here, if you were a bad person and you wanted to make people sick and weak and dumb, how would you do it? So one of the things that's happening right now is that most illness in this country, most things that people die from are not infection. It's cancer, it's heart disease, it's complications from diabetes, and those are lifestyle illnesses, and we are attempting to control symptoms of them with medications, which actually make people sicker. And chemo if it actually does anything at all, it weakens and sickens you so much that it's not even worth looking at in many cases. And there are so many. What needs to get looked at is the prevention of cancer, and that's really, so what I want to segue into is I want to talk about Monsanto.
I love talking about Monsanto. I love it.
Yeah. Because they've actually created most of the carcinogenic chemicals that are on this planet right now. So Monsanto was developed originally in the early 1900s. I'm sorry, guys. Mina, it's just your brother. Quiet. Shh. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
One of my kids came in unexpectedly, didn't know I was doing this. And
if you need to go like do something, I can edit that part out.
We're good. We're good. He left. So I think he might have come in to help me. I get some water bugs in my apartment once in a while, and they're like this big.
What are they?
Water bugs. They're
gigantic bugs.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They look like roaches, but they're huge. And
what?
Yeah. So,
why do I not know about this? Oh God.
Oh,
that's horrifying.
You don't know about it.
Ugh.
So in Florida, they call them palmetto bugs. Some of them fly. They don't fly over here, but in Florida, they fly. They're just absolutely. You know what? I honor all living things, and I actually feel bad when I have to kill them. But you know, they don't pay rent. They're not allowed to share my apartment. So one of my kids might have just stopped by to make sure I don't need any help with bugs. So that was thoughtful. Anyway, getting back to Monsanto. So in the early 1900s, this guy, John Queeny, developed Monsanto. And if you look at his biography, it's kind of like, oh, this poor boy, he was raised, you know, in a poor family, and he was poor, and he created this, you know, company. But if you keep looking, you'll find out that he actually belonged to one of the Knights of something. I don't remember which Knights.
Knights Templar?
I don't know if it was that one, but it's one of the Knight groups, and he was a Freemason, and he ended up, you know, interacting with some of the, what we call the bad guys, right? The Illuminati families. So that's the origin, the shady origin of Monsanto. And Monsanto started to produce these horrible, horrible cancer-causing chemicals, and you can't help but think that it was intentional. How can every single thing that they produce end up being like, it's proven that they cause illness in the human population, and well, animals and plants too. So the first thing was saccharin, which is sweet and low, right? And that was in the 1900s, and that's been proven to cause cancer.
And I want to just insert really quick, like when I remember this campaign, my grandmother was of the generation that would, you know, they would eat the sweet and low and that stuff. And they, so I just want to point out, it was marketed as it's better for you. It's a way to reduce your sugar intake, and it's going to help you with diabetes, and it's going to help you lose weight and stuff like that. Do you remember those campaigns?
Right. Oh yeah. Well, all this modern food, margarine, all of them, it's better for you. It's the latest in, you know, health. This is so much better. Margarine is better than butter. Sweet and low is better than sugar. And, you know, I think that was, so that was even before there were televisions, and you know, I think in the 1940s, maybe only 2% of the population had a television. It started to be more widely, the television started to be more widely installed in households. That's when the real campaign started. That's when it became brainwashing. And I don't know if you want to talk about Operation Mockingbird, but that has a lot to do with why people believe what they're being told about these products, that they're good.
Yeah, and I mean,
good for you.
Yeah, what I will say, people can look up Operation Mockingbird, and it's spelled like it sounds. I would highly recommend it, but it involves the CIA. But what I would like to point out is how television itself was marketed as something that would connect you and allow you to be in the know and be, be cool like your neighbors, and it was like this, it was promoted as this status symbol and this thing that was essential to be connected and to be able to get the news, and to be fashionable. But if you look at what it really is, it's literally a program delivery mechanism installed in your home, where it's going to be on a lot. I think people who have TV, they kind of have it on a lot. They stop thinking creatively about what they'd like to spend their time on, their free time, and they just default to like sitting in front of the tube, the boob tube, and just turning it on, and you're in this passive receptive state. And the thing that I wanted to point out about, you probably, a lot of people have seen Out of Shadows by now, television and all that. It's even called programming. But
Right.
What I want to point out is the mode, the video medium is an incredibly powerful hypnotic tool. And that's because, and I'm a student of the law of attraction. If you guys have watched my other interviews and shows, you know that. The way that you can manifest, literally the formula for manifesting, and hey, all you patriots, take note, let's use this, right? Let's use this mechanism, is you focus on something that you can try to see or envision or visualize, and you feel the feeling that you would have if you already had that thing. Those are the two key components. It was left, that second part was left out of the secret movie. But the important thing is emotion. So what does video programming do? You sit in a movie theater, or you watch a movie from home, or you watch a show, you are being shown all this imagery, and that imagery is set up in such a way to cause you to feel emotions. And what are a lot of the programs out nowadays making you feel? Think about it. You're made to watch horrific violence, predation, your attacks, corruption, scandal. Everybody in seems like in series or movies are always like, well, I'm gonna get this guy, and I'm gonna do this to this person in order to get what I want. It's this big, huge drama, and they say that that's what the public wants to watch. I'm sorry, no, that we never said that. That's what you're giving us. So I just want to point that out, that it's not just the way that we've been given these poisons, and they've been marketed to us as if they're the answer to the problems that they actually created for us. It's also the television, and that's a delivery system. It's a major delivery system, as the mainstream media is as well.
Right. And not only that, but there's also the actual flashing, I don't know the exact terminology, but there's actually something coming out of it that literally does hypnotize you, that changes your brain waves. So I did recently watch a video about that. I can give you the link if you want to put it. But
yeah, let's get the link.
Yeah, this guy was talking about, he was I think he was Scottish, and he was talking about how they actually, the government in the UK had mandated that everybody have a television in their home. And if they couldn't afford it, they would, the government would give them, a loan to, they bought all these refurbished TVs from the US, so they were cheap, and you would make payments. They would come around to your door and collect payments weekly so that you could have.
Oh my God. Oh, okay. Now see, I have to say, that blows my mind. I didn't know that. Okay, you guys, government mandated TV. Does that sound like anything we've all been worrying about lately? Government mandated vaccines. And then I want to point out too, you mentioned that this is fantastic. So if you don't get a TV, we will help you get one, because it's required to get one, but we're going to give you a loan. So we're going to put you into debt. Now, what happened with the first stimulus package for COVID-19, the CARES Act? What happened back in 2008? I'll start with that. The big banks, who were completely corrupt and criminal, they were given or granted $800 billion of taxpayer money, right? They were not required to pay any of that back. Where did it go? No record keeping required. Now, with this CARES Act phase 1 stimulus package, there might be a phase 2. What were small businesses given? Loans. We were given loans, and some of us were offered a very, very small amount and entered into a lifetime of repayment, literally a 30-year term on a $5,000 loan. I know this, talking with people. What is it? What? Why aren't the big banks from 2008 that received $800 billion required to pay that back to us as our stimulus? That doesn't make any sense. I just want to call attention to these things that we're expected to just not question.
You mean call attention to financial slavery?
Yes.
It's a thing. Yes. So getting back to Monsanto, I'm just going to quickly run through the list of evil chemicals that they produced. You all remember PCBs, which was actually in coolants for things like engines and transformers. So PCBs were banned in 1979 because they were proven to cause cancer, among other health issues, and they're still in the environment. So the thing is that these chemicals, even when they stop making them, they persist. It's very difficult to get chemicals completely out of the soil, out of your body. Very difficult. So they're still found. They're still widely found.
I'm going to just chime in as I go, a couple little comments on what you're saying, if you don't mind. If you
Sure.
haven't read Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, it's a kind of a foundational environmental book. It's really important. If you haven't read it, that's really a good book. And then what was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh, dang it, I forgot. Okay, I'll just let you go. You carry on, and it'll come up later, and I'll interrupt you.
Okay, the next one was in 1941, polystyrene, which is what styrofoam is made out of. It's extremely toxic
and not recyclable.
Or not recyclable, and it's still being used, and it's, you know, people, I know people even microwave in it. When you microwave it, when you subject anything to heat, whether it's plastic or styrofoam, anything, the chemicals in that go into your food. So
there was a download from, if you guys haven't heard of Thoth, the Egyptian god, he wrote the Emerald Tablets, which are amazing. If you can listen to those on YouTube for free. He's one of the things that he said as Metatron, which is I guess it's an incarnation of Thoth, is do not microwave your food. He literally was like, don't use microwaves. They are
I never
extremely dangerous. Yeah, I use a toaster oven. They're great.
Yeah, there's a thing called the stove, and you know, I tell my patients, you don't realize how lucky you are that you have a stove, because if you didn't have a stove and you didn't have a microwave, you'd be going out and chopping wood and you know, starting a fire. And so the stove is really a modern convenience. And how long does it actually take to heat up something on a stove or a toaster oven, or to boil water? You don't have to put your water in a microwave. You literally kill all the nutrients in your food, and microwaves produce a bad electromagnetic field. So I don't think we even yet know the extent of how bad they are. The next thing that a lot of people don't know that Monsanto was involved in was creating the first atomic bombs in the 40s. They had a subsidiary that was played a key role in the Manhattan Project. And then the next thing is DDT, pesticide that was it was developed in World War II originally for malaria, to kill the mosquitoes that carry malaria, which causes liver damage, infertility. That was banned in 1972, still in the soil. The next thing they produced was dioxins. That was in 1945, which is extremely toxic. They cause cancer, and they are integrated into the food chain. I don't think they're.
And isn't dioxin the main ingredient in in chlorine that's used to quote unquote purify our water supply, drinking water supply?
Oh, I don't know. Is it? It's found in pesticides.
Yeah, chlorine bleach. That one of the main ingredients in chlorine bleach, as far as I understand, is dioxin.
Wonderful.
I know, right? There you go.
The next thing is Agent Orange. This was the early 1960s. Most people know what that is. It was used in Vietnam. It's actually designed as an herbicide, but they used it for chemical warfare in Vietnam. And it created all kinds of horrible health issues, birth defects. I still see patients, Vietnam vets, who were affected by Agent Orange. And it, believe it or not, is still found in some herbicides that are in commercial use today. The next thing, and you're going to like this one, ZP, is petroleum-based fertilizers. So they developed that in 1955, which completely destroys the microbes in the soil, and is part of why we have depleted soils in this country.
It almost makes you wonder if when he met with the Illuminati bloodlines that you said he met with, if they didn't just say like, okay, I want you to develop a bunch of stuff that's going to just kill everything.
That's my fantasy of what happened. Exactly.
That's
why
theory.
I posed the question: if you wanted to make a population sick and weak and dumb, how would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the unfortunate result of paying attention. I've had this theory going for years here. I'm just like, you guys, is anybody else noticing this? Like, this doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And being in this field for 19 years, I've always known that, you know, these companies that produce these pharmaceuticals, these toxic chemicals, they have some kind of agenda, but I just didn't realize until fairly recently how deep it went, how far it went, and what the real agenda was. I was just thinking, you know, financial, but now I see it goes far beyond that. So, well, and the next, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you just keep bringing up points that I want. It's so interesting. I know you want to get this out, but it's like, oh wait, I want to talk about that. But this agenda, I mean, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to edit this out because now I've totally blanked out again in giving my little explanation of why I'm interrupting you. That's so funny. Okay, just carry on. I'll edit that out.
Okay.
Dang it.
Okay. And then we have Roundup 1974, which is glyphosate, right? So that's an herbicide. But it causes cancer. There are lawsuits now against Bayer, which is now taken over, bought out Monsanto, and they're actually winning the lawsuit. So people are getting there is proof or evidence that it causes cancer, and it's a hormone disruptor. It also, now this is really important, glyphosate, what it does is it damages the lining of the intestines of insects. That's how it works. We are seeing an epidemic now of people with damage to their intestines. And I'm seeing younger and younger people. I recently had a new 19-year-old patient, a new 22-year-old patient coming in with severe stomach or intestinal pain, runny stool, failure to absorb nutrients, and both easily solved by getting the, glyphosate, which is also found in GMOs. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Of getting that out of their diet and healing the lining of their gut. So
there is a list. There's two lists that I go by, and anyone can download these for free. Just Google it. It's the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, and that's a really good, quick and dirty go-to, and bring it with you on your phone to the grocery store. And it talks about the 15 clean things that you can get that are conventional produce that don't like heavily accumulate pesticides like that, and the Dirty Dozen that you should always buy organic because they tend to heavily accumulate. One example on the Dirty Dozen is celery. The way that it's like its mechanism for pulling water up and nutrients up into its stalk, it's just like laced with, so you want to get that organic, and then strawberries, for instance. So just those are some quick tools.
You can't wash it off. You can't wash it off.
It's inside exactly.
Food. And just on that note too, I want to say that it is very difficult to completely avoid being exposed to glyphosate because people spray it on their lawn. So even if you don't, your neighbor might be doing it. I live in a city, there's not that much grass here, but I was walking my dogs down the street and some guy was spraying it around the base of a tree. And I said to him, I wish that you wouldn't do that. You're poisoning us. And he goes, what? I'm just killing weeds. And I'm like, you don't know how toxic that is? People just don't know. So now my dogs, if they want to sniff around that tree, the good thing is it does wash away in the rain after a while, but still, when it's in your food, obviously it doesn't wash away. And then somebody just told me yesterday that they went to visit an Amish farm in Pennsylvania, which is where I get most of my food from, an Amish farm in Amish country in Pennsylvania. But this person said she went to visit an Amish farm, and while she was there visiting the farm across the street, which was not organic and not Amish, was spraying, and the wind was blowing it over to the Amish farm. So they are finding traces of these chemicals even in organic food now. So it's very hard to completely avoid it.
One of the things that I do with all my clients, whether they ask for it or not, is I'll recommend what's called an ecological lawn. Most people have not heard of this. You can actually get a living green grass lawn that you do not have to mow or water. And you can usually get one for any area that you live in, any kind of climate or zone, planting zone. It just depends on the species. In some cases, you might have to do low growing plants rather than like a grass species. It might be more of a ground cover species or that kind of thing. There's all kinds of varieties of them. And they are not going to require these chemical inputs that people don't realize, but a lawn is an invasive exotic plant, which means it's going to take over you see that you have to keep mowing it. You've got to keep weeding it. You've got to make sure that that's why you have these quote unquote gardeners, these mow, blow and go guys is what I call it. They come in once a week and they edge trim and they blow all the, that is, you don't have to have a lawn that requires any kind of chemicals to stay green and beautiful. And you don't have to have a lawn that requires a lot of water either, or mowing, believe it or not. And most people don't realize that. The only people that I think it would have a hard time convincing would be the golfers, because you got to have this perfect, specific kind of lawn for those little tee areas, in order to get the exact putt that you want. But on the larger greens, I mean, just think about the water we would save and the chemicals we would avoid putting into our environment if golf courses switch to ecological lawns, So it's just, I want to throw that in there. That is something that, again, most people don't know, because the mainstream media would never disclose that to us, because that would make us think for ourselves. That would make us see alternatives.
I mean, I look at that stuff and I didn't know that. So yeah, we got to get this information out there, spread a little more no pun intended, but grassroots, of information, so that we can just, the way we're digital warriors, we can also be health warriors and actually save the planet and save our bodies. So the next terrible chemical that Monsanto is responsible for is aspartame, also known as Equal, which was developed in 1974. It is used very widely used as a sweetener in so many things that you wouldn't think about. And so, even if you're trying to avoid it, even if you've heard that it's bad for you, I can't tell you how many of my patients, we've cleaned up their diet, we told them aspartame is bad, they stop using it, and then I see the gum that they're chewing, and they don't think about that their gum is sweetened with aspartame. So if it's sugarless, it's either going to have aspartame or something else called sucralose, also known as Splenda, which I'm going to get to in a minute. It sweetens, it's in medications. There are these artificial sweeteners in most medications.
That right there.
Baby aspirin, Tylenol.
I could see why you'd want, if you have like a chewable Tylenol for a baby, I could see how you'd want to make that sweet. But you could use something else. But with medication that you're swallowing, why does that need to have a sweetener in it?
Yeah, because
sense.
Americans are trained. So when you eat a lot of chemicals, your taste buds literally become numb. So if you're eating a lot of processed foods, you're eating a lot of chemicals, you're eating a lot of added sugars and added what I call bad salt, sodium chloride, and your taste buds become numb. And then things like natural, foods like vegetables, they don't taste good anymore. And so Americans, at least Americans, I don't know about other countries, but Americans are trained to, if it doesn't taste good to them, they won't take it. So
it takes a minute. It takes a little while to wean yourself down off of that. If you're switching from table salt, which is one of the 4 deadliest things for Americans, the other ones are white flour, white sugar, and hydrogenated oils, FYI. But if you're weaning yourself off, at first when you're using sea salt, you might say, oh, this isn't salty enough. But after a little while, give yourself a minute to adjust. You'll start to realize, oh, wow, that was really too salty. That table salt was too intense. You just didn't notice.
Himalayan salt to me tastes saltier than any. I only eat that now, so I don't even know what regular salt tastes like anymore.
Yeah, but once you get your taste buds acclimated to the real taste of foods, and also I will say too, I thought I did not like blueberries anymore. They always tasted bland and mushy, and I was like, I don't really like blueberries. I guess I'm just one of those people. Some people don't like mushrooms. But then I grew blueberries, and I ate them off the bush, and I was like, oh my God, that's
what they taste like.
Yeah, even I had forgotten, and I'm a permaculture designer. I should know that. So,
yeah. That is true. People that travel to other countries will come back and say, wow, I had no idea what a tomato actually tasted
like. Yeah, because they bought it from a farmer's market or locally grown.
Right, locally grown, yeah. So we have two more important chemicals to mention with Monsanto. The next one is RBGH, which is the genetically modified hormone that they inject animals with. That was introduced in the early 90s. And it's also a cancer accelerator, especially breast, prostate, and colon cancer, which are epidemic in our country. So if you're eating dairy, it's especially a problem in dairy. If you're eating pasteurized dairy with hormones added to it, you're taking in this cancer-causing thing, and then one day, you don't just wake up one day and, oh my God, I have cancer. That's not how it happens. You're feeding yourself these cancer-causing chemicals on a regular basis, day after day after day. You're poisoning yourself, and the cancer is slowly growing, and then one day it becomes a problem. Not only that, but with the hormones, I have a lot of suspicion about that, because it does accelerate the development, the sexual development of children. So just gonna put that out there.
I think that's really important. Sorry, I was eating a peach. I got really hungry.
Yep.
I think that's really actually a very important comment. I had heard about that years ago, and they showed these pictures of these young girls with full breasts and full pubic hair and everything. And I'm sorry if that's graphic for people, but I'm just trying to make a point here. We're talking about this as patriots, and we all know what that means, right? We're following Q, and this has lately been kind of hitting me more and more in the gut. Q's been maligned. We've all been censored, especially the bigger accounts. I think they've been censored. Us little accounts we're kind of slipping under the radar, so we have to take up the charge, right? But QAnon is censored as a conspiracy theory. It's not, first of all, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's a group of people. But I guess they're saying Q is promulgating a conspiracy theory. But what is Q really saying? In the bottom of it all, what Q is telling us is that there is a pedophile ring running the show. That's basically what, like, human trafficking and crimes against children, crimes against humanity, that's kind of what I found to be the root of what Q is alerting us to. So I don't think it's an accident or a coincidence that they're putting hormones into the food supply that accelerate the sexual development of children. I think that was a really good point. I didn't want that to be missed or overlooked because we breezed by it.
Yeah. So.
And why are they putting hormones in animals again? Maybe that would be a good thing to just mention.
It actually accelerates the milk supply.
Okay, so they're trying to just make more profit by pumping. So this is kind of okay. If you haven't watched Food Inc., I'll mention it again, please do, or look at other exposés on factory farming. Food and Water Watch has a campaign out now to shut down factory farms. They say their campaign says we can't even regulate it at this point. We need to stop these things. If you've ever seen the conditions, animals are people, like you said, and I love that you said that, because that's literally the phrase that I use. I almost want to get a bumper sticker that just says animals are people. It just makes you think, like, wait, what? Because it's true. They're just different kinds of people than we are. But anyone who has a pet knows that. It's obvious. It's just clear as day. Birds, everything in nature is conscious, in my opinion, even plants, but not to digress. So, I just want to keep putting that in there. I think that it's important for us to keep making those connections. And that's a really brilliant one that most people aren't going to maybe make that connection, because we're so bombarded with information. We're so bombarded with the program. But if you look at how animals are treated, it's atrocious. It's basically a Holocaust in the animal world. I mean, I'm not trying to be insensitive to what the Jews went through, but I mean, if you look at these confined operations, where they're literally it's called a CAFO, confined animal feeding operation, or concentrated animal feeding operation. And if you drive by one of these, if you've ever driven on a road trip and you pass by one of these things, it is the worst reek for miles. It's just that's what we are eating, people. And I don't want to,
I can't even think about it.
It's like
it really upsets me when I think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, in my book, when I discuss this, excuse me, I'm talking about when we're ingesting the chemicals, that's not just all we're ingesting. I think we're also ingesting the pain and suffering and the psychological stress that these animals have been through.
Right. That's one of the things I tell people about eggs, because so many people think eggs are bad for them because there's cholesterol in eggs, and people don't know that cholesterol is actually an essential nutrient that your brain requires it. Your hormones are made out of it. You cannot function. You'll have dementia if you don't have cholesterol in your body. But I tell people you have to eat the right kind of egg, and the right kind of egg comes out of a happy chicken.
Yes.
So that is true for all of your food. So your animal has to be treated properly, and as you said earlier, humanely, fed the right food, kept in an environment that's natural for them, and that is not where most of our food comes from. So, and that sense, being a vegetarian or a vegan, is understandable, because if the quality of animal protein that you're eating is very poor, then it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to create health in your body. And I'm in agreement with that. So I do believe that most humans need animal proteins. I think that we were biologically designed to need them. I know other people don't agree with that, but that's just based on my years of clinical experience. And I was a vegetarian for 27 years, and it's based on my own body, because my own body went to crap basically after 27 years of not eating animal protein. But that might have been, there's other factors there as well. But you have to do it the right way. So that is why I try to eat off of this Amish farm, where I actually can go there. I can see, I know how they're handling the animals. I know they're feeding the animals. I can talk to the farmers anytime I want to.
Yeah.
And I feel better about it, and the food tastes better, and my health is better.
I think I just want to interject that in the grocery store, if you don't have access to a farm or a CSA, depending on where you live in the world, you can in some places find what's called pasture raised eggs, and that's very different from organic eggs. And in fact, I watched a documentary which showed that the organic eggs process actually is allowed to include stages that are done in a factory farm.
Right.
Okay. That's not okay, guys. So I always pay the extra $2 to buy pasture raised eggs, which means that these chickens were actually outside eating and pecking around in the grass. The organic ones and the free, especially the ones that say free range, that's a misnomer. That means that they're in a gigantic chicken house. And if you've ever seen those things, it's actually horrific. They get, a lot of them just die. They're packed in so tight. They don't go outside. There is no grass. So I just wanted to point that out. And I want to say, my rationale, and this is, you're free to take this if you want or throw it away, but I just want to share this, is that if I'm spending an extra $2 every, week or two when I buy eggs, that is helping me save in medical costs down the road. And I do believe that's actually probably provable.
Medical bills are the #1 cause of bankruptcy in the United States.
There you go. Yeah.
I tell people priority. So the body, it has to be your #1 priority. It has to be, because you can't enjoy life. You can't be productive at work. You can't, enjoy your relationships if the body loses its health. So you need to invest in your body. Your body is made out of what you eat. That is not just a saying. You are what you eat is not just a saying. It truly is the function of food. In the function of eating is to give your body the replacement parts it needs to grow healthy cells. You're made out of cells. Your cells are always dying. You're growing new cells every second of your life. Where does your body get the material it needs to grow the new cells? And that is from food. So the purpose of food is to give you energy and to give you replacement parts to grow healthy tissue. And it's not solely for pleasure. I think that we were designed by a great intelligence to enjoy the taste of food, to make sure that we keep eating, right? The same way that we keep reproducing because it's pleasurable. But that is not the sole purpose of eating. And trying to save money by cutting down on food costs is not the right thing to save money on. Really look critically at what you spend your money on, and start. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to go home and throw everything out of your cupboard and your refrigerator, but just gradiently begin to replace the not so good eggs with the better eggs, and so on. We can put a link to the Weston A. Price organization. So I mentioned this guy, Dr. Weston A. Price, earlier, who traveled around the world researching the connection between nutrition and health. And now there's this whole organization dedicated to helping people learn about and find good sources of food. And there's local chapters that you can actually get in touch with somebody that can tell you, oh, there's a farm that you can get this raw dairy from that's clean. There's a farm that you can get grass-fed meat or pastured eggs. So we can give people that website, because that website has an article about every health topic there is, and it's all really good information.
I'm also going to link a link to, this will blow everybody's mind who doesn't already know about this, but cancer was cured in 1926, and it was cured by the Gerson Institute, and that's spelled Gerson, and you can go and look this up. But what did the United States government at the time do? They banned him from operating in the United States, and so he went to Mexico, and that's where the Gerson Institute
and also
now operates.
He has a place in Budapest too.
Yeah, and so you'd have to, if you're in America, it's probably closer to go to Mexico. But what is the regimen that cures cancer? And he's cured stage 4. He's had a huge, long success list. So this is not junk science. Well, it is a series of vegetable and fruit cleansing, and he uses like a coffee enema or something as well to get that stuff out of your colon. But it's mostly just based on plant foods, you guys. What does that tell you? What is, this is like supposedly an uncurable disease. I mean, come on. It's a very profitable disease.
The cure does exist, right? So that's also part of the whole plan, is create all these cancer-causing chemicals and then use something very toxic to treat it that usually ends up killing the person.
Yeah.
The last thing on the list of Monsanto is GMOs. So most of your sugar beets, potatoes, corn, tomatoes, squash, golden rice, which is man-made rice, soybeans, salmon, and a lot of animal feed is made out of genetically modified seeds, which have the glyphosate in them. So, it's hard to find soy and corn in this country that's not genetically modified. And then animal feed, right? So your chickens, getting back to chickens, are mostly fed corn and soy feed that have GMOs in them. So the GMOs are now in your eggs and your chickens. So the GMOs are extremely, we don't even know yet. They were introduced in the early 90s, I think. I don't think we've seen all the harm that they're doing. So these are the top 12 poisons that Monsanto has created, now owned by Bayer. Now it's Bayer. And Bayer is also an evil corporation. That Bayer was in Nazi Germany doing medical experimentation on people in the concentration camps, and very, very evil, cruel medical experiments. So it's just like, they are like the personification, in my opinion, they're personification of evil.
So yeah, like, I just want to interject like that. So, okay, again, QAnon is labeled as a conspiracy theory. I'm sorry, my favorite phrase is, the conspiracy is no theory. If you just look at what
it's true, it's not.
Yeah, like, well, what you just said though is enough right there to prove there's a conspiracy. My last show I did with someone working on plastics in there, that we exposed a direct and obvious and clearly documented conspiracy in the plastic manufacturing industry to poison the planet and et cetera. Well, this is, if you just look at just this one company, Monsanto, Bayer, okay, all those things you just listed, that's enough. They're obviously poisoning us, even if it's not even intentional, even if they're just really stupid and they don't realize that they're all really toxic and they don't believe the science that shows that they are. Let's just say it's not a conspiracy, it's all innocent. Well, they still should be completely stopped because they are putting toxins into our food supply and the environment, right?
Right.
But
right.
it just so happens that they are also, they had roots in Nazi Germany where they were doing cruel experiments on people. I mean, come on, at what point does it, do you not, like, this is an obvious conspiracy. The CIA, as most of us know, invented that term anyway, conspiracy theory, to dissuade citizens from investigating stuff, right? This to me is something that it leads into what I'm kind of gathering from Q lately more and more, and what I'm thinking from what you're telling us, Dr. Corey, is like, really what it's going to come down to is responsibility. The people are going to have to take responsibility at some point, because it's so corrupt. And even though the swamp is being drained and Q is at work, and I trust Q because of the quality of the output that they have shown, but still, I think at some point it's going to come down to us and taking that responsibility.
And not at some point, it has to start now.
Yeah,
you have to start taking responsibility, at least for your body. You can do that. That is what basically what I do, is give people knowledge about this stuff so that they can take more responsibility and more control over their health. And anybody can do that given the right information. So you may need help with it because it is a big job. And even I need help with my own body and my own health. It's hard to be your own doctor. What's that saying? The doctor who treats himself has a fool for a doctor and an idiot for a patient. But we can. I'm happy if you want to, in the comments of this video, if you want to ask for a local practitioner that can help you with this. I can't believe how much time I actually spend on Twitter, people direct messaging me. Is there somebody that can help me with this health problem or that health problem? And I spend a lot of time making referrals, and I'm happy to do it because it's part of what I do. This is my purpose on this planet right now. I just want to give you just a quick rundown of a few other items that are really, really toxic. These are not Monsanto related, but things that people don't know about. For example, potassium bromide is put into wheat in this country. So potassium bromide, it's called bromated wheat. It enhances elasticity in the wheat and the dough. However, it is cancer causing. It causes extreme problems with your thyroid, not just your thyroid, but we have an epidemic of thyroid disease in this country. Everybody has thyroid nodules now, right? Everybody has thyroid nodules. A lot of that is coming from this potassium bromide in the wheat. So
can I just ask for those people who do not know, is that something that would be on the label of the bread that they're buying? How do you avoid that?
So only if it says unbromated wheat. So basically what I want to say is, don't eat wheat in the United States unless you know where it's coming from, unless it's called heritage wheat. The wheat seed has been screwed around with. The wheat seed post World War II, that was like the first genetic modification. They modified the wheat seed to increase crop growth. They caused a lot of problems with the wheat crop now. That's why there's this big problem with gluten. Gluten is not the bad guy. It's the gluten in the bad wheat seeds that's the problem, right? So I would say in general, try to avoid wheat in the United States.
Oh man, what about pizza? Okay, so what are our alternatives?
Have cauliflower pizza. It's delicious.
Okay.
It really is. Yeah, you wouldn't even realize that you're eating cauliflower.
What about bread? Like oat bread?
Yeah. So I recommend no, because there's issues. All the crops, all the commercial crops are sprayed with pesticides and fungicides, and they're highly processed. And then when you mill something into flour, you're getting concentrated amounts of the bad stuff in it. I do recommend that people eat sprouted grains. So there's the Food for Life Ezekiel brand bread that's made out of sprouted grain. So when you take a grain and you sprout it, it becomes more like a cross between a grain and a vegetable. higher in protein. It's not milled into flour. There's nothing added to it. It's really clean. So that's an alternative. And they actually make pita bread, so you can make your own little personal pita pizzas out of it.
And you can make, is it possible to get flour in the United States that's not bromated?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you could make your own pizza too.
Yes, you can get alternative, what I call alternative grain flours as well. There's plenty of if you go on, I don't go on Google, but DuckDuckGo, and you search for paleo recipes, you can find alternative flours. You can quinoa flour and almond flour and coconut flour, and there's lots of recipes that you can find. There's even mixes. If you go to a good quality health food store, you can get pre-mixed. Simple Mills brand has mixes made out of almond and coconut flour that you can bake your own stuff with. And then there's also other alternative flours. Just make sure they're organic. There's teff, T-E-F-F, is similar to wheat.
Yeah, I like that.
They're spelt. There's a lot of them. So many people have issues with wheat. But if you can find flour, actual a bag of flour that says unbromated, and don't forget, if it's white, it's bleached with chlorine gas. There's just so much bad stuff in wheat flour in this country.
Well, and what I had mentioned before, those 4 killers, I want to highlight that again, and I'll try to put that in the comments, the 4 killers. But they did a study of the things that kill the most Americans on a yearly basis. In the United States, we have white flour, and that's what you're talking about there. We have white sugar, which is just heavily processed cane, from the sugar cane plant. You can suck on a sugar cane, and those natives who would eat the sugar cane, the plant, they never had dental caries, they never had cavities, right? And then the hydrogenated oils, of course, which is a process that makes it stay solid at room temperature.
Not just hydrogenated oil, but commercial oil in general.
Let's talk more about that because it's really hard to find. I watched something that said that a lot of olive oil was actually not really olive oil again, and let's talk about that.
There's a lot of fake oil and fake honey and things like that, but oil, if it's not expeller press, means like you take an olive and how do they make olive oil in Greek islands and Italy where they churn it in this big tub, right? And they're pressing the oil out of it. If they're not making it that way, commercial oil, they're pouring hexane gas into it. That's how they extract the oil.
It's crazy.
And then you're eating the hexane gas, which is a hormone disruptor.
It's just insane.
Yeah, so it's a hormone disruptor. We have extraordinarily high levels of infertility in this country right now. And not only that, but just to mention vitamin D here, because vitamin D is more like a hormone molecularly than a vitamin. And so if you're eating a lot of commercial oils and you have low vitamin D and you're using toxic sunscreen and you're blocking out the sun, you have low vitamin D, your immune system is going to suffer, and then it's going to be easier for you to get sick. So there's a whole chain of events that occur when you eat these things. So go on, you hydrogenated oil, you said the sugar, the flour, the
oil. Table salt, iodized table salt is really super bad for you. And again, all these 4 killers, the reason why they're bad is because they've had everything that's good processed out of them, and they've been turned into poisons. So you look at coronavirus and how we've shut down the entire planet for the first time in history for this. I don't think they did that with the Spanish flu. The whole planet, except for Sweden. Sweden was smart and they're fine. But this is ridiculous. If you look at what's really killing us all and what they're writing down as COVID-19, which is not, and that's heart disease, cancer, and diabetes, right? And those are what these 4 killers cause. So really, again, this goes back to taking responsibility and really, we can't trust those people who are in charge right now telling us what to do for the most part. They're all lying to us. Not all of them, obviously. We've got some good people right now. Trump is a true person, and he's up there trying to help us and save us from all this BS. But I think that it's really going to come down to stop listening to quote unquote outside authorities and listen to your intuition and follow your gut, literally, and listen to holistic doctors and listen to, ecological designers and people who are really you know, they're tied into the natural wisdom of the earth, because this is our home. And I was talking to somebody the other day about, Elon Musk and how it's all like, yeah, I want to implant your brain with this AI interface so you don't have to go on your phone to use Facebook. Are you kidding? Oh yeah, let's go to Mars. I'm sorry. That is not, we don't have the technology to be able to terraform Mars. Wake up. This planet is our home. It is our only life support system in the known universe. There is no option, as depicted in all these sci-fi movies, of leaving the earth for somewhere else because we messed it up. We can't mess it up. We have to just get with the program and wake up. And I think what that means is like getting off the program. What was it, Dennis Leary, who said, tune in, turn on, drop out? I can see that being so relevant today, almost more relevant.
Although he was talking about LSD, but
yeah, I know he was.
Another
but
story.
You don't need to do LSD to wake up and be
right.
Make decisions for yourself that get you out of the matrix. Essentially,
right.
Just unplug yourself.
Right. Yeah, it's about taking full responsibility for your body, and the only way you can do that is to have knowledge, to become aware of what's really happening. So to not allow TV commercials and TV shows and social media and MSM to program you into, not allowing that to be the source of your information about health, because it simply is incorrect. And it has led us down a very dangerous path.
Absolutely. I'm going to put a list of recommendations that we want to share with you guys. And getting rid of your TV, I would say don't throw it away, recycle it, or if it's not possible, donate that, to someone else. I hate to say to give it to someone else because we don't want people watching this stuff, but get rid of it. You don't need it. Find other ways of getting information, and think about the consequences. But I wanted to just bring it back to HCQ, and I wanted to bring it back to the COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2, because that's what's going to be on most people's mind whenever they think of the topic of health. And you had mentioned something early on when we had been talking, I think this is before the show, that there are other therapies, other alternative therapies besides HCQ. I wanted to start out by asking, what is HCQ? What is hydroxychloroquine exactly? And we talked about zinc a lot, so we thank you for that explanation. But what are the other alternative modes that you as a doctor have seen has been working with people?
So HCQ is derived originally from quinine, and quinine is a natural substance. So I am not a drug pusher at all. I try to get people off medications, but as far as medications go, it's actually a relatively benign one. So quinine is something that's actually really good for you. It's hard to find sources of quinine that are not loaded up with sugar. So tonic water has quinine, and if you drink gin and tonic, you're drinking quinine, but generally tonic water is loaded with sugar. So if you can find quinine that doesn't have sugar in it, not saying that you should necessarily take it, but it won't hurt you to take it in most cases, right? So, and just as a disclaimer, I'm not prescribing or recommending any particular therapy for anybody that's not my patient. I really can't. We like to customize things for you specifically, and what works for one person may not work for another person. So, don't try this at home necessarily. Find a holistic practitioner that you can consult with. That said, quinine is, something natural that, like I said, you're drinking anyway if you drink.
Well, that's what George Norrie, who's the host of Coast to Coast AM, which is the largest late night radio talk show in the nation. That's what he said he's taking. He's drinking the quinine, and I kind of laughed.
Yeah, and I happen to love tonic water. I found a low sugar version of it. I don't eat sugar. And I just want to say, we didn't really touch too much on sugar, except for you to say that it is, one of the top killers, and it is. But sugar is a much, much bigger problem than people even realize, and most people are addicted to it. And high fructose corn syrup, we didn't even talk about that.
Yep, just avoid it, basically.
It's sugar, and it's GMO, and it's really, really toxic.
Yeah,
but
just stop eating that stuff.
Just say no to high fructose corn syrup.
You'll feel better right away.
Right. So getting back to natural intervention for coronavirus. There have been studies published in medical journals, so I didn't make this up, with sweet wormwood, also known as artemisinin. That's a little bit of a mouthful, artemisinin, which I've been using in my practice for years for a variety of immune challenges, parasites, viruses, you name it. And most people are able to take it, you know, again, with herbs. Herbs are not drugs. There's relatively little side effects or interactions with other things, but you always want to consult with a practitioner. But I put all my patients on artemisinin and zinc, a little bit of whole food vitamin C, and make sure that they're getting good quality vitamin D, and everybody did great. And by the way, I do this every year. So I didn't just do this year. I do it every year when we're approaching flu season. So we're approaching flu season at the same time as holidays start happening and people start eating crap. So when you're eating crap, you're reducing your immune system, you're more likely to get sick. So I start telling people, let's start, you know, building up your immune system, let's say in September. And that's traditionally when school starts. So, and then my teachers are getting sick from the students, and we just start building up their immune system. So sweet wormwood, there are published studies that show that it is effective against coronavirus. It works similarly to HCQ in that it pushes zinc into your cells. So the combination of artemisinin and zinc. Some people also need some good essential fatty acids. People, by the way, we talked about bad fat, but we didn't talk about how important good fat is. So good fat, you know, fat is not bad. People think fat is bad. People think cholesterol is bad. Bad fat and bad cholesterol are bad, but you need fat. Your brain is made out of fat. Your brain is mostly fat. Your nervous system is mostly fat. So people who are not eating enough good fats, you know, sometimes for their immune system, they also need to take maybe some good cod liver oil. It also has vitamin A and D in it. And that's what we do. So if you want to prevent illness in your body, you want to protect yourself from getting sick, it's not that difficult. Clean up your diet. That's the hard part. Take a few good quality herbs and supplements. And in my office, we use what's called whole food supplements. So vitamin C, and this is also part, I think, of the earlier talk about how to make people sick, weak, and done. Vitamin C is sold in stores as ascorbic acid. So if you go into, let's say, a local drugstore, even a lot of health food stores, and you buy vitamin C, on the label will say vitamin C or I'm sorry, in the form of ascorbate, whatever, ascorbic acid. Yeah. That's not vitamin C. That's a very, very small component of the vitamin C complex. All vitamins are made of a bunch of stuff. Ascorbic acid is one small part. So if you take a lot of ascorbic acid, you're actually creating an imbalance in all the other components of vitamin C. So in my office, we use the whole food form. Everything, all the vitamins and minerals and supplements we use are derived from whole food grown on an organic farm.
Where would you get them? You mean just eating food rich in vitamin C?
No, I mean, you could, but it is hard to know how much C you're getting in food now.
Right.
Right.
Unless you have a permaculture food forest.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a solution. I would love it if I could just get all my nutrients from food now, but that's just not a thing anymore. But no, there are companies that make vitamins that are derived from food. So that's what we use. And these companies mostly don't sell like commercially. You can't go into a store and buy them. They're primarily sold to practitioners, not to be exclusive, but just because these companies are really ethical and they want to make sure that you as a patient are getting what you actually need and you're not just guessing. It's hard to figure out what nutrients you're deficient in. Like so you need somebody to help you with that. That's what I recommend that people do, is really find a really good practitioner that uses whole food supplements that could give you really good food counseling.
And I'll try to get that link from you for the study that showed the sweet wormwood artemisinin.
Yeah, there's multiple studies.
Yeah, okay,
and if you just put it in your browser, artemisinin and coronavirus, you're gonna see it.
There you go. Well,
yeah.
I just want to kind of bring it back to how you were saying that something that early on in our conversation, and I know we're getting kind of over 2 hours now, so I want to wrap it up soon because I know we could
Yes.
just talk all day.
Yes.
And we didn't cover a whole lot about permaculture, but maybe I could do another video at some point about that more in depth. But essentially,
yeah, we could do a part 2. There's much more we can say. So
yeah, and I mean, I think the important thing I really wanted to kind of bring back around to was just that you had explained that the tests that are being administered for C19, for COVID-19, or the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, that they're actually just testing for coronaviruses. And that to me really stood out as something that, one, it's not being publicized, so we're not being told that. And two, what it means is that you could have a cold, or you could have the regular seasonal flu, and you're going to test positive for COVID-19. That right there is proof that of what we've been being told this whole time. If you're looking at any alternative information sources, and that's that. Then this is not a true pandemic. Yes, it has affected a lot of people, but why? Because of the media scaring a lot of people, and our corrupt governors making us wear masks. I don't know that the numbers really justify the level of panic and shutdown that we've all been put through.
Well, I just want to say I don't think it's about a virus. I think it's about the election.
Exactly. And that's what I think a lot of people who are not, following Q and are new, and they're just, I don't know, no insult intended, but just, normies following mainstream, they have no idea about. And this is intentional, of course. And it's really what digital soldiers have been tasked with, is to try to help get the information out, which is what I'm trying to do with these shows. And this might get taken down because we're talking about alternative treatments to coronavirus. That means you don't have to worry. And also,
we'll put it on BitChute if it gets taken down.
I'll get a BitChute account and put that up there. I think it's a good idea for posterity. But I want to kind of, I think for me, one of the biggest questions I want to continue to ask people to think about, to consider, if we can go and buy liquor, if we can go to Walmart, and these other places that have been open this whole time, why can't we vote at the polls? What's the difference between voting at the polls and shopping at Walmart, or buying these liquor stores for some reason have been open this whole time?
Part of that too is the liquor stores and the Walmart. What you get there is part of weakening.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. Exactly. So if you just think about it, the rationale, and of course, Obama was just at a funeral, and what did he do? In his eulogy, he started talking about voting by mail. Like, what are you doing? That's so disrespectful and inappropriate for him to do that. But yeah, they're pushing this vote by mail thing because it's a way for them to cheat, because they want Donald Trump out of office, because Donald Trump, they can't control him because they don't have any dirt on him. They can't blackmail him because he's clean. And he's working with the Patriots. We think that he's working with the Q team of Patriots. But we don't know that for sure. But we have definitely seen his track record is incredibly good. What he's done in the short one term he's been in office so far, it's impressive beyond any other president in my lifetime. He's taken a stand that no other president I've ever seen has taken. And we know that Kennedy was assassinated a fairly short time after he announced his knowledge of a deep state. And it's kind of like, well, Trump's picking up where he left off. Now, Trump has some advisors, that are maybe like Anthony Fauci wasn't. I don't really trust Anthony Fauci. He said a lot of things. He's probably just aligned with the deep state based on what he's been saying. So, Trump's not a medical professional, but he's being advised by medical professionals that we don't know if we can trust or not. So I'd really like to see that change, but it is what it is. So I guess my kind of final thing I want to say is to really look at what can you do to detach from the system in ways that you can empower yourself, especially with regard to health, because we are being bombarded. I don't think the novel coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, is going to be the last thing they're going to hit us with at all. And what this list that Dr. Corey just gave us of all these poisons that just one company's put into our environment over the last years it's been in business, that should be enough to make you want to protect yourself. So I would say, really look at what can you do to build a victory garden, a survival garden of food that you can grow yourself, and you can control what you put into the soil, and you can control how healthy the soil is. Start thinking about not just your body's health, but your ecosystem in which you live and belong. What is the health of that, and how can you build that up? You know, in the short time I've lived in the last couple of years I've lived in where I live now, I've got the outdoor courtyard near my front door just thriving with life. I've got a praying mantis baby hanging out of my giant bean arbor that I've created out of scrap wood, and I just found some tree collards at the local nursery, believe it or not. I scored 2 tree collards, and if you don't know what that is, it's one of the things I love to specify for my clients, and that is perennial vegetables. These are vegetables that you can plant once and they grow for the rest of your life. They will give you food, and you don't have to go back and be dependent on driving to the nursery and paying money and hoping that they have it in stock. I got really lucky when I got there. The guy said, we had this shipment, we just once in a blue moon get these. And I know this because I've had to mail order these kinds of plants for my clients before, and they come in a little cutting and you hope it survived the mail. But I got 2 live plants, tree collards. They're going to get 6 feet tall, and they're going to give me collard greens, which is one of my favorite vegetables for the rest of my life. And I've got a purple and a green one. And you better bet when I move, I'm taking those with me, right? So it's like thinking about that, not just you know, supplements and diet, but thinking about how you can also grow your own. You know, I have a sorrel plant, and I remember I ran out of greens and I didn't go to the store and I forgot. Well, I just went out to my garden and picked some sorrel for my dinner, and therefore I could keep up my you know, nutrient intake for that day and not go without. So just even those little supplements really matter. Those little times when you can pick a few fresh tomatoes, pick a few strawberries, whatever it is. Ultimately, the goal would be to get a garden going to where you have a food forest. And I didn't really talk about much about permaculture, but a food forest is essentially a mimicry of that climax ecosystem I talked about earlier on in this show, where you're actually setting up not just a normal forest system that's feeding, kind of, you know, doing like what you would see in a healthy forest, which we really don't see that much anymore, but more like a rainforest jungle, where you're going to have layers of food throughout the whole canopy of the forest, where the trees themselves are going to be producing food, but you're going to have vining plants that are growing in the under canopy. You're going to have what I call subshrubs, which would be like tall shrubs that are taller than you or I, but they're not as tall as a tree. You're going to have those producing food. You're going to have ground cover plants and shrubs and perennial plants that are like the size of like a, you know, daisy flower plant, and all kinds. So just food everywhere. And you're going to have all kinds of what I call beneficial organisms in that food forest. They're going to be doing the work for you. One of the biggest benefits of permaculture is that it's self-maintaining. And for anybody who's got a mow, blow, and go gardener account that you're paying out weekly, that should mean something to you, because what those guys are actually doing is degrading your landscape over time. They're blowing away all the organic debris that should be being piled up on top of your soil to help start breaking that down and giving nutrients to it and holding moisture. And they're just pruning stuff while it's in flower. You know, it's a degenerative system. And so really think about, you know, how can you really establish not just your own unit, you know, your sort of your individual unit, but look at your community and look at your neighborhood and what kind of fruit trees exist there now. A lot of people in California are lucky to have fruit trees growing in their backyards, right? So the previous owner planted some kind of orchard and they've got weird stuff growing back there. Think about what you could add to that, and think about all those layers that you can add to the system to give yourself a supporting system in case we have another breakdown or a worse breakdown, or the poison just, you know, they keep advancing. Let's just say we can't take down this deep state, you know. So I know it's a dark thought, but and I'll do some kind of PSA for this and show you guys some graphics or something like that to help you, because we didn't get to cover much of that. But so Dr. Corey, do you have any parting words for everybody? We covered a lot today, and you shared a lot of great information, and I took notes, and I'll try to share links to a lot of the stuff you shared so people can actually go and find that stuff. So we'll talk after this about getting those links and stuff. But what would you like to leave people with?
Well, I want to leave people with a message of hope, because I know that of all things that we don't have full control over in this world, one thing that you can have control over is your health and your body. And it's not as difficult as you think it is. You just, you know, need a little bit of, let's say, cheerleading or hand holding. It can be done. And wherever your health is right now, no matter where you're at with your health, you can get improvement. Even if your health is in a really bad state, there are things that you can do to get some improvement. So unless, you know, unless you're at that end of life point where you can't actually eat anymore, and then yes, then maybe that's a bad point to be at, and then maybe there would be no hope. But for most people, you can be healthier than you are, and there's no such thing as being too healthy. No such thing as being too healthy, too wealthy, or too beautiful. That's what I always say. but health is an ongoing process. It never ends. You never get to a point where you're like, all right, I'm healthy enough, I don't have to worry about it anymore. There is always going to be challenges that you run into, and even the aging process is a challenge. But I feel very hopeful and optimistic that the state of the planet is going to improve, and that we will actually end up with a healthcare system rather than a sick care system. I believe that in my heart.
Hurrah! Huzzah! I second that, and I think you know, it's interesting if you just think about the microcosm, macrocosm, our biosphere, our local environment, our front yard, backyard, and our bodies. If you just think about how quickly the earth responds to beneficial regenerative inputs like those in permaculture, that your body system is the same way. It wants to be healthy. It's got built-in mechanisms to be healthy. And if you simply sort of halt the barrage from outside by these deep state jerks that are trying to tear down your body's ability to maintain your health naturally, it's the same thing with the landscape. I really see that as a complete tie-in. We are of the earth, and not just in a conceptual way, literally.
Yes, agreed.
Agreed. Okay, guys, well, thank you so much for tuning in. I know this was another long show, but I think it was worth our time. And thank you, Dr. Corey, for joining me on Zombie Permaculture. And we'll see you again.